Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Zippy the Wonder Snail. What a joy it is to be with you today. You may have noticed I'm not quite as enthusiastic in joining Jason in the Zippy dance today because I'm still recovering from back injury, one of the reasons why we've been away for so long, but we would not let anything keep us from reviewing everything going on in the world right now. Two Christian guys discussing the news and culture that matter to you. Hey, Jason, how are you today?
Oh, I'm good, Tim. Hope you're doing better. It sounds like you're still on the path, but there it
Yeah,
is.
well,
I mean,
you may remember years ago, I would talk to you about that rousing speech from John McCain. Stand with me, and right now that's all I do. I am. This is the first time I've ever recorded Zippy standing.
I'm the complete opposite of you. So we've got standing and sitting covered. Now we just need
So
someone to kneel through the entire podcast, and we'll just have all the liturgical movements covered. Uh,
yeah, and
pardon the pun.
if we get really dry, someone might lay down and go to sleep, and then we'll have everything covered.
Your sermons for later. We don't want them to sleep right now. Uh,
That's true. We do have a lot to
uh,
come to today, and that starts with a sports update. Well, comrade, does that music kind of capture the mood of our St. Louis Cardinals this year, would you say?
yeah, they're a wild bunch. They're so young. They're still trying to figure it out. This is where I'm irrationally optimistic. Uh, this is that part of the show. You guys know how this works. Um, we just got out of April. I'm not that worried about it. Um, Granted, we're just barely ahead of the Pirates, but we're playing the Pirates starting tonight. So if there's any way to get the Cardinals off the schneid, it's playing the Pirates. So yeah,
That's
love you,
true.
Paul Stewart. Enjoy that one.
I was just
But that's
thinking, yes.
true.
Yeah, well, we've been so bad that we've actually been giving Paul a reason to hope when we play the Pirates, and that's troubling.
Yeah, well, you have to really give him a lot of hope because he tells that joke first game of the season. It'll be like ESPN forgot to put the E next to the Pirates' name on the score. On the score sheet, the listing there. Uh,
Yeah.
tragic stuff. Um,
Well, it seems though, so what, comrade, just the way you set us up there and talking about your optimism, before we go any further, can you just mention what year it is? Because we've had sort of the same conversation the last 2 years. I want to make sure our listeners know that this isn't a replay.
this is 2025.
Okay,
2025.
just thought we should
Yes.
get that out of the way there. It is 2025, and you're optimistic again. I'm on the ledge of my one-story window. Pretty desperate times here. So help me to think about this. It seems to me
Oh, you're
you're
on the
right
edge
there.
of your one-story window. Oh, it took me a
Yep.
second. I'm just slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, just sort of like the teams start. And looking at them, I mean, they obviously have a lot of pop in the bats at times. Some of the pitching's been encouraging. I think the thing that I keep coming back to again, and I want you to talk me off this ledge if you can. I'm still on hashtag team fire Ollie. Uh, what I see consistently is there's a guy that's struggling and Ollie still sends him out. He doesn't switch it up, even if it means the game's going to probably be in jeopardy. We've seen quite a few games go south this year where I knew the guy should be pulled out. Even the announcers on the radio were not trying to be quite as pro um, team management, and they were saying out of the gate, it looks like this guy is struggling, he needs to be pulled out, that sort of thing, and they don't pull them out, the whomever it is, until the game is out of control. Talk me through that. How do we get out
Yeah.
of that?
You mean the pitcher, or you mean a hitter specifically, or?
Well, I'm thinking
Both?
primarily pitching, but there have also been times where there's someone who's just
Yeah,
not hitting and he hasn't hit all game, and now they just won't take him out and put in someone who has a hot bat. It just seems
right.
like we stay on the same road even if it looks like, yeah, the bases are loaded and this guy isn't hitting, but we're still going to play him. We're not going to do the substitution. Or yeah, this guy just loaded up the bases and it's a one-run game, but we're going to leave him in anyway. Those sorts of things.
Well, and it's a delicate. Here's what I'll say: it's a delicate balance when you're the manager, because the worst thing you can do, and you'll hear Ollie say this, the worst thing you can do is take a guy's confidence when he really needs to grow in his confidence. And if he knows you don't believe in him, you'll lose him for the entire season. So I know he's trying to give people that other crack. We need for instance, we need Miles Michaelis to work on his fastball location. And if he can get his fastball location in order, then his breaking ball will be more effective. Um, we did see, I don't know why Miles jumped to mind immediately, but that's for me somebody that really needs to get going. But
Yep.
we saw in the very beginning, I remember at the very beginning of Michaelis's time in St. Louis, I said, man, he does have a little bit of a propensity to give up the home run. He was dominating the game. He was throwing all kinds of stuff that they couldn't hit. But every once in a while, when he was on his third time through, they'd get him for a couple home runs and we'd still win. And now we're in a place where, he's walking guys, he's giving up big hits, so that propensity is still there. It's still all about the fastball location. And I think these guys are really talented. It's just the April rust, and now we're into May, but it's just the April rust shaking off. We've got a fantastic bullpen. I mean, I think that's what we need to hang our hats on. We still use, even with the struggles, we still use our starting pitchers more than any other team in the league, which means we're going to be rested when all these other teams are trying to just figure it out in the middle of June and July. Um, so that that's that's the heart of the optimism. I don't think we need to give up on anybody. I think we just need to keep giving these guys confidence and giving them opportunities. We got some hitters, man. We have some
Yeah.
serious hitters. So
Yes. Yes.
I th-
That I'll grant you.
I think the pitching will come around, and I again I'm irrationally optimistic, as we've said, but that's what I do. If I believed that we didn't have the talent to win anything, I would tell you straight out. But we do. We clearly do.
Yeah. Y-
So,
You know, I think that's part of what's frustrating to me about this team is it's not a lack of talent. I mean, we've given up some guys I wish we still had. Watching, I mean, I wasn't necessarily advocating that we keep Goldschmidt last year. It wasn't clear if maybe he just kind of reached the end of his career. Clearly, that wasn't the case. He's back to old Goldie form this year, but uh, we've given up some people I'd love to see us have, and we've had people retire that I miss, like Yachty and Wainwright. But it's clear we have talent. It just seems like there isn't anyone that's able to unlock that talent for us.
yeah, I remain concerned about Jordan Walker. I think that's one area of concern. This is supposed to be Walker is supposed to be the Cardinals' number one prospect, and he's not hitting. So, and this is a couple of years in a row now where we're not unlocking this amazing power, this amazing talent of Jordan Walker. So that is one thing to keep an eye on. How long do they go with this project? Do they send him back to Memphis? Do they send him lower to straighten out the swing? Um, do they shorten up his swing motion? Do they somehow shorten up the swing to get him to the ball quicker? We don't know, but I'm sitting here with such a great bullpen, such talented guys, even in the starting rotation, and going, I mean, we should kill these Central Division foes. And I still think we're going to. Um, it's, I mean, let's be honest here. We don't really think the Cubs are going to run away with this thing. The Cubs? Really?
Yeah, may it not be. May it not be. One thing we,
Yeah, me genoita in the Greek. Yeah, the me genoita in the Greek, Tim. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's serious enough. It needs to be actually in the original Greek.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and I figure Milwaukee's going to straighten it out before the Flubs figure it out. Uh,
yeah, one would hope.
before the baby bears
Now,
start to do. Yeah,
one thing on Central Division though. Um, I don't know that we've even talked about this on Zippy. What do you think about this new scheduling system? It seems like we hardly ever see our divisional rivals any longer. We see them in little bursts here and there, but we go a lot of the season. We started the season and it took a while to even get to divisional rival. Last year
yeah.
we ended the season without nary the sight of a divisional rival for the last bit of the season. What do you make of this new scheduling system?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? They switched from 18 divisional games
Hmm.
to like 12 or something like that. Um,
Yeah,
I
something.
think it's I think it's terrible, but I will say that the reason for doing this is that a lot of the super high priced marketable talent in the league, at least for a long time, was in the other league. And with the universal DH now, you want to see these big stars in the American League come through your park. You're getting more interleague stuff going on. That's probably your motivation. But best player in the league, Shohei Ohtani, is back in the National League with the Dodgers. So that's a strike against they're not a divisional foe, but at least he's back in the National League. So, and I'm very excited, God willing, when I get back to St. Louis. My first game of the summer with my dear mother will be against the Dodgers, so I'm very excited. Uh, that was my father's team, so I'm excited about that. So anyway, I don't like shrinking the divisional games from 18 to 12, but I can't change it. Apparently, the husband and wife that did the MLB scheduling for 30 odd years by hand uh, retired or went away or went to heaven. I'm not sure. And I guess now there's a computer doing it, which if you wanted to mess up, just give it to a computer. Wow,
I
that was
can't argue with
that
that.
was a luddite thing for a guy to say who's doing a podcast right now. Uh,
Just a bit, but I can't completely argue with it as we had to fight our computers just to get the podcast to record. Uh, Sometimes you sort of think that we're reaching the end of our season as the computers take over. And speaking of reaching the end of the season, what about the Blues?
oh, oh yeah. Uh, we've been blethering on for 20 odd minutes and we didn't even get to that brutality that was the Blues in game 7. Oh man. Let's just skip right to the end, all right? Blues are up 3-1. We've got 2 minutes to go. Playing well, clearing the puck out, and that's all you needed to go. Make them go 200 feet and score the goal. We botched a couple clearing attempts, which is the first step to total disaster in a hockey game is failing to get the puck out of your defensive zone. Uh, so Winnipeg, it's 3-1 Blues. Uh, Winnipeg gets their first goal at 18:05 of the third period, which means there's 1 minute and 55 seconds left. The Blues make it approximately, no, precisely, they make it precisely 1 minute, 52 seconds, and 8 tenths before they give up the tying goal with 2.2 seconds remaining on the clock to, oh, so brutal, to force overtime. And you're thinking on the road, this is not good. This is not good. Uh, Home team in overtime, game 7. This is not good. But we survived. the first overtime. Actually, we put a scare in them a couple times. The Thomas line was really excellent. I was listening on the radio. More on that in a future podcast. Uh, and we made it through. So I'm thinking, I'm glad I'm not watching this because I don't. I'm 45 now. I don't want to have a coronary while listening to watching the game. Uh, Glad it's on the radio because by the time I'm able to register that we lost or something, it'll be too late to go into sort of any sort of life-ending disaster scenario. Uh, but we coughed it up. I think it was roughly something like 6 minutes to go in the second overtime, something like that. Um, and they got a deflection. Now I want to say to the audience who may not be avid hockey watchers, deflections are the toughest things for goalies to stop. Predictably, since Jordan Bennington is the greatest goalie on the face of the earth, and I truly believe that, he stopped like 20 of those. It seemed like all Winnipeg was doing was tipping the puck on each other's shots. Um, but they got a deflection from the point. Once again, we failed to clear out of the defensive zone. It went in the net. Kerber was so sad. Chris Kerber on the radio. I almost flew home or flew up to Winnipeg just to hug him. It was brutal, just brutal. Not a way you want to end your season. But let's look at the positive real quick. To make a run to win 12 games in a row, to get yourself into the Western Conference playoffs, to 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 scare the best team in the NHL, the winners of the President's Trophy for the best record in the league, to scare them within half an inch of their lives in the seventh game on the road on their home ice is truly impressive. When these guys get healthy next year, and pray we don't have any other injuries, these Blues are going to be a nightmare for the rest of the league. So
I know next to nothing about hockey other than that I was going to start blaring Gloria again if we got past this. But certainly no, seeing how they had that incredible run up to this point, and even like you said, I mean, if you can get to a game seven and play as well as they did, where your your loss comes at something that happens very unfortunately at the very end, it seems like it bodes well for maybe next season.
you're a decent numbers guy. I'll try to illustrate this as much as I can. Before the coaching change, Drew Bannister was our coach. They started to struggle. Um, we fired Bannister. Jim Montgomery got let go by the Boston Bruins, um, where he made a cup final against us, by the way, in 2019. Um, and they went from roughly 2.5 goals per game to 3.3 under Jim Montgomery. So they started scoring some goals. And that's what they needed to do. We have the best goalie in the world. We have some of the best defensemen in the world. We just got to score some goals and take some pressure off. And that's what they were able to do. Thomas got unlocked even though missing 12 games. Jordan Kyrou got unlocked. Uh, those two guys together are just unstoppable. Jimmy Snuggerud came from college 2 weeks ago playing in the NCAAs and jumps right onto the second line in a Stanley Cup playoff series. Are you kidding? Like this guy can't. This guy can't even probably can't even buy himself an adult beverage. Like, what are we even doing? But he's there and showing great skill. So, um, and then some of the midseason trades before they made the run, they got Philip Broberg back on defense from the Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton just gave him away. And I'm missing somebody else, Dylan Holloway, who was injured during this series, but amazing, first and second line winger. He's going to be back next year. He's fantastic.
It's good to hit the hope at the end of a Blues season for the Blues. But we do need to move on. We are running out of time in this segment, and I know you won't forgive me if we completely skip over Caitlin Clark. So why don't you give us like the briefest rundown on where things stand with her?
See, season's about to start. The Fever are loaded. They have acquired new players to try to win now. They were not expected to make the playoffs last season. Caitlin Clark led them to a 20-20 record, which qualified them for the playoffs. They did lose in the first round, but they're not going to do that this year. Some are projecting that this might be the best team in the league. They made a trade for All-Star Dewana Bonner at the forward position. They got a guard, Sophie Cunningham, from I believe she was with the Dallas Wings before this. She's out of Missouri, Sophie Cunningham. She went to University of Missouri, Columbia, where I went to school. Although she's quite a lot younger than the both of us, you might imagine. Uh, Aaliyah Boston's back. Everybody's back. I mean, it's gonna be it's gonna be fun, and it's starting in about a week. They played the preseason game at the University of Iowa, where Caitlin went to school, like yesterday or the day before that or something. Uh, they played the Brazilian national team and beat them by 66 points.
That sounds pretty good. Well, I know you'll keep us up to date on that because in the midst of some of the other things we need to talk about, it's nice to just be able to take that break from the world. Let's go ahead and roll into our first sponsor of the day, which is biblical.com from FaithTree. And if you're looking for a way to, speaking of which, get a little break during the day, you may not be able to play basketball or hockey or baseball. If you're like me, you can't do any of them, or at least maybe you could say you were doing them and just injure yourself. That's what I would do. But everybody that has a computer or a phone, you can grab your device you're listening to us on, go to biblical.com and check it out because it's a great word game. And there's a second word game, Anagrammal. They are free and they are to give you a break during your day. Comrade, we mentioned in the last segment what year it was because I wanted to make sure that your Cardinals predictions for the last 2 years, people didn't just think we were, replaying them. I want to come to another one of your predictions now
Okay, all right.
because we are in our POTUS and Pontiff segment here. And if you recall our last episode, it's been way too long, but our last episode was on the eve of the United States election. We made some
Yes,
predictions.
correct.
Do you remember what your predictions were?
Pennsylvania flips. That would give us that'd give us like 290 something, right? I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so she would need one more that's close, and I think Nevada would be that. I honestly believe the Republicans are dreaming about Nevada. Um, so so if Nevada goes to Harris, and Pennsylvania goes to Harris, and Georgia goes to Harris, there you have, and the blue wall holds. There you have. Harris is at 300, I believe. I think if we added all that up. Um,
I'm really dubious on that. Yeah.
I was very wrong. I was very wrong. Uh, Although I would say, um, most of the uh, people you want to pay attention to in this prediction business were saying this was going to be very close, and Nate Silver was saying it could go one way or the other, and it went the other. Um, and it was Donald Trump who went north of 300 electoral votes, so he's back. Um, as if our listeners didn't know that, Tim.
Well, they probably
But
didn't because we haven't said anything about it, so they didn't know what happened.
yeah, if we don't say it, does it actually happen? Uh,
Nope, no. They can hold the
Not at
inauguration
all.
now. Well, I just want to remind our listeners of that because, one thing you and I were talking about before the show was the fact that we can say you are consistent. And, you've had your Cardinals predictions, you've had your political predictions. I just wanted to note that you are very consistent. So, congratulations on that.
Well, as you know, it's been 10 years of a very unique um, political realignment that we're still in, and given that some of the old standbys as far as how are these swing voters going to go, how are these states going to go, it's completely haywire. So
Yeah.
truly, I mean, after this time, even without Trump running next time, presuming he can't get around the Constitution, uh, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, that does bring up an interesting point to kind of cap off his first 100 days that happened last week. He did an interview with Kristen Welker at Meet the Press yesterday and said that his whole musings on another run and the Trump 2028 gear and so on was all trolling the media, that he's not serious about that. So he doesn't seem to be contesting the Constitution on that. He did mention, though, when asked if it was his duty to enforce the Constitution, he didn't know. So maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a bit odd since I think it's in the oath. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's in the oath. You know, I don't have anything to add on that except somebody smart on the team should say, "Hey, sir, yeah, that's you. Don't say that anymore." Uh, a bit embarrassing, to be honest. Well, and let's hope across the political system that a lot of this um, argy bargy, as it were, a lot of the quote unquote chaos that you see will bring about a recovery of the separation of powers and the other branches actually doing what they're supposed to do. Uh,
Yes.
which, yeah, we really need that. We really need, especially Congress, um, to get in the game, to start making laws, even to stop. Okay, I'm opining now. You're the pastor. I have a little more freedom than you. Ha ha ha. But uh, but to stop pawning things off on the bureaucracies that are attached to the executive departments that can make their rules, and with a brief comment period they just make a rule and just go with it, and no one's watching and no one's paying attention. Get Congress in there to start making laws and say, hey, you can't do that, don't do that, we're going to limit it this way. You answer to Congress. The executive answers to Congress, at least along the lines um, of Congress's Article 1 authority of the Constitution. So, and the president's powers are delegated in Article 2. They're clearly delineated. So there's a few weird constitutional moments where you're like, they probably didn't think that was going to come up and they didn't specify, but because we're still debating, like, what does advise and consent actually mean?
Right.
Uh,
Yes.
you know, we're they don't tell us. Does it mean they just rubber stamp it, or can they say no? And we're kind of in a long phase where we say actually Congress can say no if they want to. And then Article
Yeah.
3 is of course the judiciary. Um, Congress has not to this point tried to rein in any of the power of the federal courts up to and including the Supreme Court, but they could theoretically um, under Article 1. They just haven't done it. So we'll see what happens there. It does seem, I'll offer this opinion as well briefly. It does seem that since John Roberts became the Chief Justice some 20 years ago or more, um, he seems more interested in preserving the institution of the Supreme Court rather than following a clearly defined judicial philosophy. Uh, is this about as critical of John Roberts as I've ever been? Probably. Um, and that's becoming more pronounced. So we'll see where that goes because it seems like he's just sort of making up stuff as he goes along, and sometimes he gets the conservatives to join him, and sometimes he gets the court's liberals to join him, and it's all over the place. I don't know. We'll come back to that later, but
Yeah, we should do a whole segment on SCOTUS again sometime soon, but it does seem like yeah, it seems like he is a perfect example of an institutionalist, right? That's what he is about, is that institution. Um, I like what you bring up about the separation of powers and some of the exploration there. It does seem like, and I've kind of felt this on the things I've seen both pro President Trump and pro opposition to President Trump in different areas, but it seems like maybe there could be something said for the benefits of simply getting to settle some of these matters, whether it's Congress stepping in more, whether it's the courts ruling on things. Uh, I think there's something to be said about the virtue of us simply, some of these underlying tensions that have been boiling in our culture, that we actually go through the process we have in our Constitution. We have the Congress legislate things that they say they'd like, but they never get around to, and we have the courts rule on some of the less clear parts of the law and settle things. It seems like that could be a net positive for us.
what you might do, and it's a bit risky, um, but what you might do is remove the what you might call the supermajority requirement of the U.S. Senate to pass things. Um, because basically, if you don't get nearly 2/3 of the Senate to sign off on something from the House, it's not going to become a law. So all these ideas get thrown around, and especially the House is bringing up, new ideas to fix problems that arise, and then it just dies, and then everyone just ends up frustrated, left, right, and center because nothing happens. Um, Maybe do like we did for the judicial nominations and stop that supermajority stuff, except for the big stuff that really needs to be debated for a long time, and let's have some legislation come through. And even if legislation was getting repealed every 4 or 8 years, oh well. I mean, this is America. That's why we have three branches of government.
I hate to see the filibuster go, though. Because I mean, you hit on exactly the problem we would end up with, where every 4 or 8 years, or maybe every even shorter times, right? We could have the balance of power swing in the legislative branches, 2 years one way, 2 years a different way.
Yeah, yeah, they changed some things around. Yeah,
Just an example, and this happens with executive orders. For example, the Mexico City policy that's always implemented under Republican presidents, prohibiting, really good thing, prohibiting funding of abortion activities around the world. I mean, we're both
yeah,
Christians. We've been very clear we're pro-life here on Zippy. So I mean, if you're pro-life, you can't help but be excited about that because it's exactly what it's about. But because
right.
it's an executive order, every time the Republicans go out of the White House, the Democrat repeals it, and
Yeah,
then
they just
Republicans come
reverse it.
back in,
Yeah,
they reverse it again, and
yeah.
I'm afraid that's just what we get in our Congress too, where yeah, we'd finally get stuff through, but they'd just be constantly repealing and then reapplying the same laws over and over again.
Yeah, and this is probably part of a wider discussion, but I remember a very good book that I read, uh, Congress: The Electoral Connection by David R. Mayhew. It's not a partisan thing. It's not like you're gonna pick up this book and dislike your enemies even more. It's a structural analysis of what goes on in Congress. Why does it go on the way that it goes on? And I think that um, if we implemented some of those changes that um, Mayhew recommends to reward seniority, reward moderation, uh, stop incentivizing electoral strategy as the driving force of legislation, then we could see less of that back and forth as the administrations change. But that's a longer discussion, hopefully free of you know partisan garbage that you might hear on other shows. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just a political scientist, so you know, I, I'm out of the partisan game, and I know largely so are you. So we just kind of watch and see, um, and then comment when appropriate. We try to give a Christian perspective, but we dare say, offer an educated um, Christian perspective. You're quite the observer. I've got a political science degree. Between us, we're a couple of dorks, and that's just how we handle that there.
So let's do a dork's eye view then. As we think about the first little glimpse of the new Trump administration, and here we are, 100 and a few days into that. I think it'll be 107 days by the time this goes up. Um, we've gotten to see a taste, and it feels like a lot longer than that. I think it feels like a lot longer than that for everybody because it's been highly charged and very fast moving. Everyone who's a supporter has why it's been the best 100 days ever. Everyone who's opposed why it's the worst 100 days ever. I thought maybe we could try something different, just kind of like bullet points. What are your two favorite things of the last 100 days and your two least favorite?
I'm gonna sort of dodge this
That,
in
oh,
terms of
you're even more of a politician than I thought.
in terms of legislation or executive policy. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the vice president, um, JD Vance, and um, behind the scenes. Like I've been kind of critical of Vance. I was critical of where he came from in 17 and where he is now, ideologically and team wise. But one of the beautiful things about JD Vance becoming our vice president is that there's young children running around the White House again, um, and I think our candidates getting younger in general is a good thing. I think little kids growing up in the White House is a good thing. President Obama had little kids; now they're grown. Um, but the Vance kids are even younger, and uh, you know, Mrs. Vance, um, she's a very fascinating person. A lawyer, isn't she, Tim? Something like that.
I believe so. Yes. Yeah. I think so. I think they met in
Um,
law school.
yeah, that's right. And she's a Hindu, and then JD's a Christian. Just became a Catholic not too terribly long ago. Um, so the youth, the energy of youth. Also, JD bringing now whether he does it well or does it poorly, that's not for me to say. But at least attempting to bring a perspective from Appalachia, which is a region that's often neglected in our country. Those are really positive things. Um, I just love seeing little kids running around. I like seeing our candidates be younger. No disrespect to President Trump, who was the oldest ever, and then President Biden, he was obviously one of the oldest ever. Uh, but we're getting younger. That's super positive. So, your turn.
That. Oh, yeah. Well, I think I can offer a couple of things on each. I'd say I already mentioned one. I'm always glad when we quit advocating against life. So that's a good thing, I think. Mexico City policy going in. I always love to see it come back, and every time there's the possibility it will, I find myself watching the news, waiting for the announcement that that order has been signed. So that's a good thing. I'd also say that something that I would put in the positive column, and it's funny, I didn't expect this to be one of the controversial things, but you know me, we've talked about this on the podcast, so it's not like I picked it up because it's the partisan thing of the moment. I've always been a fan of Elon Musk, so seeing some of his efforts, even some of them that I might say I wouldn't have done the way he did, I like having someone like him and the people around him looking at things and trying to provoke change. Again, we could get into a whole discussion on how they do it, but I think it's good to have people outside DC looking at it and smart people outside DC, not just the loudest people. And obviously, Musk can be quite vocal. But one thing I think, and this is where I hope that as he goes back primarily to private life, that maybe he's left an impression or has continued influence. One thing, if you look at his different companies over the years, he has had a string of companies where he succeeded. Most entrepreneurs can't turn around and create companies the scale that he does over and over again. And I think one of the reasons that's worked is he's been very good at Tesla. He's been very good at SpaceX, at the Boring Company, at X, which struggled when he first came, but seems to be kind of rebounding somewhat. Um, he's been very good at surrounding himself with really, really smart people who are really excited and are able to get things done that other people just talk about. And so I'd say that's good. I think you and I could maybe when we talk about the judiciary, it's worth talking about maybe places where they were too aggressive or what have you. Um, but I like having his mind around. I'll say that, and I say that as someone who liked him back when he was a Democrat, and I like him still now when he's a Republican. I like Musk as a person, and his visionary style. Not always his rough edges. I mean, I think anyone who's really honest can say he says some things that would be better he didn't do, didn't say, and so on. But I'll give that. Um, okay, two areas of concern then. One, I'd say, has been our foreign policy. I'm concerned about how that works out. I'm a little more optimistic after the Ukraine mineral deal that maybe things are coming together there, but definite concerns. Just, we've talked before about how it's good as Christians to want to be good to our partners around the world. So I think that's an area we'll still see. Jury's out. And the second one being, I think, how this whole trade war goes. It's unprecedented. I'll just say, as someone who studied economics a lot in school and loved it as a hobby since then, a lot of this doesn't work in my head because some of the way it's explained actually doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what the outcome is, but I'd put those two things in the negative column.
Right. And I would just echo that. I have concerns about our foreign policy as well, um, especially relative to Russia, and their ongoing aggression toward Ukraine and basically everyone, if we're being honest. So we have to see again how this shakes out. Um, President Trump, he doesn't always show his cards all the way. Um, he looks like sometimes, I guess I'll sound like a supporter for a second. Sometimes it looks like he's just randomly rolling the dice and seeing what happens. But um, one strategy might be to create a ruckus around his comments or how he did a certain thing to get a negotiation partner, to get Europe, to get our allies to step up, to do their part, not being free riders on U.S. military strength and U.S. diplomatic strength. So he'll do something crazy to wake everybody up, and then it goes back to normal after everybody goes, "Hey, we need to do something here because America may not America may not do it." Uh, you know, um, but then the ongoing concern about that is how much of this is driven by impulses and not strategy. So you're going, okay, that could work, but only if it's a focused, intentional effort. And I don't like some of the pro-Russia stuff that's been said and done by the administration, either in this incarnation or the first one. So that continuing, the aggressive, some would say punitive immigration enforcement is an ongoing concern for me. Um, the celebrated's the wrong word. The highly visible case of Kilmar Garcia is in the news. He got sent back to El Salvador, even though he was under a court order, especially not to be sent back to El Salvador. And then, uh, and then the Trump administration was saying that they can't get him back, which sounds to me like it's not true. But we'll see where that goes. And then other parts of the executive were saying, "Hey, we think he's a gang member." So okay, so you have due process concerns and all that, and again, militant enforcement of immigration laws, even catching up U.S. citizens there. That's an ongoing concern.
Yeah, as Christians, we definitely need to be concerned with not only are we uh, seeing our government apply the law and even laws that a government can rightly apply, but are we doing it in a way that is humane and humble and honoring of the of that every person's made in the image of God. I think that's something that we probably should come back to because we are running past time, but we need to make sure to cover one more thing in this segment. Speaking of President Trump, he did throw his hat in the ring, you might say, with a post this weekend indicating he would like to be the next pope. Jokingly, of course. He said it's a joke, but he did post a picture of himself ready to issue a papal declaration. So, comrade, that takes us to the Vatican. And just with a few minutes, I want to make sure, in case we don't get to discuss this before the next pontiff is selected, what's sort of your quick take on where things are at the Vatican right now?
Well, no one knows, because the conclave is secret, and it has been for several centuries, because there used to be all manner of conclave shenanigans until recent legislation, and by recent we mean within 500 years or something, to clean up the political shenanigans in the conclave. Uh, but we can say that the next pontiff needs to obtain 75% of the votes of the eligible cardinals who vote to be named the pontiff. So, uh, and um, and people are still sad at the loss of Pope Francis. So, some people were quite upset with President Trump's joke. Uh, I know that I was briefly upset, and I thought it was in poor taste. Uh, and of course, he can't be the head of the Roman Catholic Church because he has to be a baptized Catholic in order to do that. Um, well, let me say that more clearly. He needs to be Christian baptized and fully received into the Catholic Church. So, uh, yeah, because we generally recognize everyone's baptism if they're given in the triune name and you use water. Uh, but he needed to be a Catholic in order to be eligible. Technically, though, that means that every male baptized Catholic in the world is eligible. I'm eligible, um, but not very likely. Um, I would predict this is happening. We're recording this on a Monday. By Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, we're gonna have a pope because they don't take more than 5 days. It's been decades since they took more than 5 days. So,
So, just a quick take, comrade. As far as if you were to sort of discern sort of the general mood, do you think I think we could say fairly Pope Francis was more of a reformer type pope, not in the reformational sense, but he was more he was more towards the progressive wing, but not on the far left of the Catholic Church's orthodoxy. Certainly,
Yeah,
Benedict was seen more as a conservative pope, but not on the far right of the Catholic orthodoxy. If you were to just take a guess now, which way do you think is going to go for the next pope? Do they just kind of continue where they were? Do they want to kind of pull back? Or do you think that's even something people can predict right now?
I can't give any names, but I predict that we will have someone who presents as sort of a moderate that is actually fairly conservative theologically, but not a firebrand, not an ideologue, but just a guy that's gonna keep things doctrinally, theologically the same, but do it warmly. Very similar to Pope Francis, although he had connections with some of the more, I hate to say liberal, but some of the more open minded voices among the clergy. But we're going to see sort of like a mainstream guy that defends orthodoxy, but not like some sort of animal passion that he has to put everyone in their place. Just a guy that maybe like a an avuncular sort of guy, you know. Uh, it's almost weird to say this. It's almost like the maybe the Catholic Church will go in a Joe Biden sort of direction, like a just a bad
Well, he's
example, but
technically eligible.
he's technically eligible, although given his health concerns recently, not likely. But just a guy that is friendly, well regarded, not a young person as popes go, but not an old person, just somewhere in the middle. Probably an early 60s guy, maybe mid 60s, and he'll have a 20 some year papacy, and he'll try not to change too much. The interesting thing will be to watch, does he loosen the restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass? Um, Pope Francis had reasserted some control with his document Traditionis Custodes. Um, but I see that more positively as more of a uh, reassertion of control by the bishops over against the priests, more than a clamping down on the liturgy itself. So we'll see if uh, the next pope loosens those restrictions or keeps them the same. Uh, that's what we'll be watching for. I don't think we're going to see any of the Africans. I'll say that very quickly. I don't think we're going to have an African pope. Um, I think we're probably going to have an Italian pope.
It's been a while. Actually, there hasn't been one in my lifetime. So
Over the ages, if you bet on Italy, you're probably going to win that bet more than lose that bet. So I say Italian, and
it
that's all I got
it
for that.
it will be interesting, and we'll have to come back to that. But we have one more area of prediction to cover in today's show, so let's go ahead and we'll jump into that.
I don't know if she can play guitar that fast, but it started to sound like something she would write.
It almost did, didn't it?
That was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can't get any licensing for her music. We're not big enough podcasters for that. But here is the
yeah.
question, comrade. Where's Taylor?
Um, I don't know. Maybe we should ask where's Travis.
You could, yeah.
Where's Travis
Um,
Kelsey?
Yeah, you certainly could. I don't think he's been seen recently either, has he?
Maybe she's hiding out in the Kansas City suburbs with Travis.
Yeah,
He
eating
he
barbecue
he
probably.
did he did probably he did buy a mansion out that way recently in Kansas City. Presumably, it was for her. I mean, he didn't need a house. I don't think. Um,
Yeah, so
so,
you know, we're actually beginning year 5 of Zippy today, and our very first episode we reviewed Folklore, her pandemic art album, and
golly, that was 5 years ago.
well, it was 2021, so what, 4 years, but we're going into our fifth year here. Amazing, isn't
Oh
it?
wow, yeah, that's right. Well, she
Yeah,
released it. Yeah, she released it in
yeah,
20, but
yeah. It's been 5 years since she released it. Yeah, or it will
good
be in
grief.
July. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
the you know, the interesting thing in that period thereafter, I mean, she completely dominated everything, right? You had a whole string of releases. You had um, Evermore, then you had several Taylor's versions, re-releases. Then you had two new albums have come out, but then it's gotten really, really quiet. And notably, not just quiet as far as what she's releasing and the fact that she's not touring, but she's not even posting on social media now and hasn't for a number of months, which is reminiscent of the period before the release of her album Reputation, one of the two that hasn't yet been re-released. And so I thought, while we're making predictions, why don't we? I'm going to throw out, see what you think of this. I think that she is not saying anything in order to say something, which would be very much par for the Swiftie course that is Reputation. Not very hard with only two left, but I suspect that's what's coming up.
See, I had to. That really throws me off because I didn't realize that Reputation had to be redone. I thought it was after the controversy with Scooter What's His Face. Um, but I guess not. So she's going to redo Reputation. What an amazing album that is, though. I mean, whatever she does with it, it's only going to get better because that's just what she does. But that's aging pretty well for me. I didn't like it at first, and now I'm like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, completely with you on that. Yeah, definitely agree. I think it's aged very well.
Endgame just kills me. That's my favorite song from there. So yeah, Endgame's a great song.
And I'm sure we'll see Ed Sheeran make an appearance to re-record that, no doubt.
Oh yeah, Ed Sheeran. I love Ed Sheeran.
We'll probably see some Vault recordings that go on there. There's probably another one with Sheeran, I'd imagine somewhere in there. Seems likely. Um, but I'm betting it's going to be anytime now, and so I think that we need to mark this, and hopefully it will be a more accurate prediction than say your electoral prediction or your Cardinals prediction or your predictions in general.
Wow, that's brutal. Yeah. That's,
Well, we like to be accurate here on Zippy.
wow. Uh, we reported Jason Cries. Wow. Okay. Uh,
We are running out of time, comrade, and we don't want to miss our Bible segment. So let's go ahead and, with that note, mention our last sponsor of the day, which is FaithTree.com weather. You can go there as we go through the spring season with so much weather going on, right? It seems like it's raining constantly here in St. Louis, and you'll get to enjoy that when you're back here. But
hey,
we
same.
know summer
Yes.
weather. Yeah, yeah, summer weather is unpredictable. You need a good place to get weather, and you want it not to track you. So go to faithtree.com/weather today. It's free. It'll give you a scripture that relates to the weather, and it will not track you as it does it. So check it out. faithtree.com/weather.
Can't believe we got the licensing for that. Are you about to rent me a car? That's what that sounded like.
No, we were going to talk about Christology, actually.
Oh, yeah. Way more important.
But but a lot of people treat Jesus as if he rented a human body.
Yeah, but he didn't though. That's the amazing thing. So so let's cut to the chase right here. Um, as we know, there are some councils in history. This was help me get my dates right here, Tim. The Council of Chalcedon, was that 451? Am I in the ballpark on that one?
You're in the ballpark.
Yahtzee. Okay. Okay. So a little bit Tim, as you know, and none of the members should be surprised, but um, FaithTree uh, and Little Hills operate um, within a, could we say, sola scriptura framework. So we start from scripture, um, and then we can bring in councils and things after that. Uh, I do not. Surprising the listeners, I'm Roman Catholic, so councils are infallible. Yada 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 yada. So that's a little bit of a difference between us. But one thing that we agree on is that Chalcedon in 451 got this 100% right, and that is where the council defined that Jesus is 100% God and 100% man, with no confusion, no mixture, none of that weird stuff. He's 100% God and 100% man, and to put it in the language that we've come to use, Jesus is one divine person with two natures, a divine nature and a human nature. So, uh, we had a bit of a debate about this with somebody this week, didn't we, Tim? Uh, and we kind of had to clarify that a little bit. And
Yeah, yeah.
and I know it's a bit risky, but it had to do with the Virgin Mary. One of the
Hmm.
tricky questions with Mary is, uh, um, did she give birth to God? That's what we were talking about. And the answer, strangely enough, is yes, because Jesus is one person with two natures. She can't separate the nature. She didn't give birth to a nature. Um, in essence, she was graced by God to give him her human nature, which is even more mind blowing. Um, he his father is God, so God the Father has no human nature. He's just God the Father. Uh, and he has a stepfather, Saint Joseph, but he didn't take anything biologically from Saint Joseph. So uh, it's from Mary. So when he chose to come into the world as a human being, when he took on human nature, she gave birth to God. Now, the reason why that's tricky is that some people, and when the council defined the title Mother of God, some people took that to mean, or they had a question, does that mean that she is the origin of him? Well, no, not really, because he's taking on a human nature. He um, he had a divine nature, and he's taking on a human nature in addition to the divine nature. And what's interesting about that, and something that we worship and we contemplate, is that he kept his human nature. He took it on, came into the world, died on the cross, was risen from the dead, at the behest of God the Father. We had that debate a few weeks ago, but it was God the Father who raised Jesus from the dead, even though Jesus could have raised himself, but he chose to be risen by the Father. So he rose from the dead and ascended into heaven, and he still has the human nature. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father right now, whatever that means, with his human nature just up there, so he's not ashamed of us, and that way, uh, that allows him to die on the cross for us, to be a substitutionary atonement for us, because he's a human being. Let me say that carefully. Technically, not a human being, but a divine being with a human nature. But he's like us, so he can die for us. Uh, and I I don't know. That's confusing for some.
Well, it's beyond our full ability to comprehend, right? But I think the
Definitely for
key
sure.
thing is that we hold to what Scripture says, and Scripture is very clear that Jesus is God. John 1, we were talking about that before the show. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I think um,
The word was
there's a
God. Yeah,
there's a reason why John wants us to start there. And so then when later on in chapter 1 he talks in 14, now the Word became flesh. He doesn't say, and the Word inhabited a fleshly body, where he's implying, that there was a person who was about to be born, and God said, "Oh, that's the person I'm going to inhabit. I'll take over his body and use it or something." No,
yeah,
God experienced the fullness of human experience, and I think since we are constrained by time, maybe we come back next time and look at Colossians 1 that you mentioned. But the clear thing here is that Scripture wants us to embrace the idea that Jesus is fully God, fully man. We can't say he's fully God and he kind of put on a man face or a man body or any other kind of costume like thing. It wants to be very clear. No, he lived a human life. He's the second Adam, as Paul says. Scripture's clear on that, and it's clear on why that's important because of exactly what you said. If Jesus is any less than fully God and man, then he couldn't do what he did for us. And so when people, I thought it was really astute. We both follow at Liberty Ethics on X, Rachel Ferguson, and she said of the quote that started the debate we were in, it was from John MacArthur, and he was saying that Mary only gave birth to Jesus, not God. That shows a wedge there, right? That's the problem, is it's a wedge between who Jesus is and who God
yeah,
is. And the reason he said it, and he's explicit on why he said it, is he wanted to go after Catholic theology about Mary. And he goes on to say that, but what Rachel pointed out is that you take that first part of his quote, and you don't even have to get to the second part. If you want to tell someone, I'm doing my theology in order to be anti-Catholic, without saying it, you can say something like that because as a Protestant, MacArthur is a Protestant, I'm a Protestant. I just want to preach what God's word says, and God's word's very clear. We don't make that distinction. The only reason a Protestant would make that distinction is in order to somehow try to get something on Catholics. And thankfully, for the most part, the vast majority of Protestants have joined with Catholics and Orthodox over the last 1600 years since that council and said, well, I mean, we don't go back 1600 years, but the church as a whole has joined together and said, no, we're going to hold these things together. We know that Scripture says that God is both truly God and truly man, and as the church fathers would talk about, the councils did a beautiful job of distilling the mind of Scripture. They take these things that someone wants to latch onto one verse and hold on to and brought them together so we don't do that. And I think the challenge is when we're reformulating how God's faithful throughout the ages have said things because we want to somehow get the people that we feel like we need to put down. Uh, we're at real risk of actually being the ones that fall into error. And we should be careful because, especially in a place like this, boy, we do that, and what happens? Now we're starting to separate that there was a human Jesus and a divine Christ, and that human Jesus somehow died for us, but a human by himself that wasn't also God himself couldn't die for us, and so now we've ruined that.
yeah. We're in docetism and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Good news is Jesus really did come. God really came into this world, fully God, fully man. He lived, suffered, and died for us. I think that's where we're going to have to wrap up with time tonight, comrade. But can we really wrap up on anything better than that?
No, not really. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ will come again.
Amen. Well, if anyone has any questions, we are going to get back to that subject in the next episode. But if you have any questions, if you have any prayer requests, we always love to hear from you, and you can find the information at snail.zip. That's our website, snail.zip. So make sure to check that out. You can also find all of the past episodes from our first 4 years in this podcasting game as two Christian guys who talk about the news and culture that matter to you, you can check out all those past episodes over there as well. It's always great to get to share this with all of our listeners, and especially with you, comrade. And I am so thankful that we get to do this today. So as we get ready to wrap up, I look forward to next time and when we come back together. But in the meantime, we'll watch some of the things we've been talking about, see how they come out. Thank you, comrade.